today's tutorial is all about braiding. So this is a technique that we're going to be using through the project as a way of creating a chain or necklace or bracelet for you to add your polymer shapes onto. Now there's a couple of reasons that I'm choosing to do this as a technique rather than just suggesting that you hang your polymer clay onto chain metal. The main one being about cost. So again, if you was to add your polymer clay onto silver plated jewellery or gold plated jewellery or even solid silver or solid gold, it's going to be much more costly for you. So by using more affordable materials such as ribbon and cord, you're keeping the overall cost of your jewellery down. The other reason is very similar to the polymer clay again, in that cord and ribbon can be bought in a huge range of colours. So in terms of design, it's going to be much easier for you to add even more colour to your jewellery and make it more visually impactful. So those are the main reasons really. We're going to be exploring braiding as a technique. I mean, obviously you could just use ribbon and hang a jewellery item off of the ribbon like so, and that might be quite visually impactful. But to explore your techniques and develop your skills, I'm going to be showing you 3 different ways of braiding. It's going to start as a basic method, then we're going to have an intermediate version, and then a more challenging, complex braiding attempt. So I would like you all to have a go at all 3. You might end up with various levels of success at the end of it. Don't worry about that. If you find that actually the complex one ended up a bit of a mess, I'm not going to suggest that you use that in your jewellery. It's just good to have a go and at least attempt it as a way of developing and exploring new skills. Okay, so when you are creating these braiding samples, the length of the ribbon isn't going to matter too much because these are just for you to have a go at the techniques. So don't worry about the length of the ribbon at this stage. When you come to creating the bracelets and necklaces, what you'll need to consider is that as you braid your material, it will actually end up a shorter length than what you cut it at. So if you wanted a necklace to be a particular length, you are going to need to increase the length of the ribbon before you cut it. But for the sake of these samples, it doesn't matter. This is just us having a go. So you're going to start off, I would suggest for the first braiding technique, using ribbon. Okay, now you can use cord, which is thinner stuff, but just if this is your first attempt at braiding, you'll probably find it easier with a thicker material such as this ribbon, and you'll need 3 strands of it. Okay, I've used 2 different colours here, but you could use 3 different colours. I would suggest not having all 3 strands the same colour. 1, because it's not going to be as effective in terms of design, and 2, because when you're braiding it's going to get a little bit confusing as to which strand is which. So by having at least 2 different colours, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. So the way I would start is by fixing the point a point on the table. So you want a flat surface to work off. I'm just using masking tape. You might find this works just tying the ribbon around something very heavy onto the table. So this will hopefully stop the ribbon from moving whilst you're working with it. Okay, now I'm going to lay out my ribbon in the order that I want to start off with. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be naming or numbering each strand. So this is 1, 2, 3. Now this is a basic braid, so anyone that's plaited a hair, this is that technique. If you haven't plaited a hair before, this is how it's done. So this is a basic plait. So you start with ribbon 1 and you move it over to 2, so that becomes number 2. You then go out to number 3 and move that over to number 2. So the outside pieces are taking turns to swap and become ribbon number 2. So now this ribbon is moving from the outside and becoming ribbon number 2. This ribbon is moving from the outside and becoming ribbon number 2. And this is your basic braid. Now for the way that I've shown you here, it's producing quite a loose braid. If I was to do this formally properly, I would hold all 3 ribbon strands in my hand at the same time and switch them round. So the outside ribbon becomes number 2, moves to the middle. The outside ribbon becomes number 2. The outside ribbon, number 2, and so on. Now don't panic if you can't follow because I'm going a little bit faster. It's just that after a while of practicing this technique, you'll probably find you're the same and it becomes automatic, and you're just switching. The outside ribbon goes to the middle and you switch the sides each time. Hopefully you'll end up with a braid that looks something like that. Now you can pull it tighter as you're braiding it and you'll get a different effect again. or you can go looser and you'll get a different effect. If you go tighter, the length of your ribbon is going to go shorter and shorter. So just bear that in mind for when you're making jewellery. So this is technique number 1, a basic braid. Okay, so technique number 2 is a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit trickier. So again, don't panic if you don't get it first time. Just rewatch the video and pause it and slow it down if you need to. So we're going to start again with the 3 strands of ribbon. And again, I'm sticking to 2 different colours. I've taped it down so it's nice and secure. I'm keeping my light blue as the middle one, and this will stay in the middle for the entirety of this technique. I refer to this as a wrapping technique, and you might actually decide that when you start doing this that you find this easier than the braid, but I'll be interested to see what everyone thinks on this. So I'm going to start. This one is going to stay in the middle, and if you want, you can secure it loosely at the other end of the table. So this has actually now been stuck down at the other end as well, because that's not going to change position. That's always going to be strand number 2. So as I said, this is a wrapping technique. We're going to start with number 1 strand underneath the ribbon and back into its original position. Number 3 is going underneath number 2 and back to its original position. Now it'll take a while, a few attempts at this for it to start taking a form. But each time you can see that ribbon is going back to where it started. So they don't switch positions. We are just effectively using strand 1 and 3 to wrap up strand number 2. And that's why I call it a wrapping technique. So if I keep going so you can see what the result will look like. Now I definitely would suggest that strand 1 and 3 need to be different colours for you to get a more impactful effect on this. But as you can see, hopefully on the camera, you get a really nice pattern, almost like the diamonds on a snake, and it's very consistent and neat as well if you keep going with this one. So that's technique number 2. It should be fairly straightforward. You might find if you're using cord for this that you need to use a much longer piece of cord, because just the way that you are continually wrapping, it uses up a lot of 1 and 3. There will need to be much longer pieces of cord than the second one will be. Okay, and now technique number 3, which is the trickier one, is a knotting technique. Now you'll see straight away that this looks a little bit more complex because there are 6 strands instead of 3. You can use 3 strands to create this braiding technique, but I'm going to show you on 6 just in case you want to challenge yourself even further. Now again, you're going to need to stick them at the top. How you lay out the ribbons, i.e. whether you have them alternating colours or like I've done 3 and then 3, is going to determine what sort of pattern you get running through your braiding. And again, you could introduce other colours now, so it could be that you have two strands of 3 different colours. It's entirely your call. If you've got time and the different ribbons to play with, you might want to experiment a few different times and see which effect is the best or the most preferred for your jewellery. So I've stuck them to the table again, just at the one end this time. These strands, we're going to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now this is just knotting, so it's not wrapping this time. I'm knotting. So strand 1 is in my right hand, actually, ready to come over and for me to knot a standard knot to strand 2. Strand 1 has now become strand 2. This is strand 1 now. I'm going to knot it again. So I'm going to do a double knot, just as if you were doing your shoelaces. So double knot, strand 1 has moved to strand 2. Now, throughout this technique, as you start from this side, the ribbon that you start with, you move right through to the end before picking up the next strand and repeating the technique. I'll show you what I mean. So at the moment, I'm still working with strand 1. I'm now knotting it to strand 3. So again, double knot. This strand 1 has now become strand 3. Going to move on to strand 4, double knot it to that one again. And you can see now more easily where I've changed colours that strand 1 is now strand 4. And you can guess what's going to happen next. So I'm knotting strand 1 to strand 5, double knot, before then knotting it to strand 6. And this is where, especially for this technique more than the other two, you're probably going to need to work in a quiet room where you might not be disturbed or lose your focus, because it would be quite easy to make a couple of mistakes here. You could forget how many knots you've done, so end up only knotting once or end up knotting 3 times, or you could forget which strand you were working with. So it's quite important really to be quite focused on this technique if you want a good effect. So strand 1 has now become strand 6. We now go back to the left side and we're going to be working with what was originally strand 2. And you literally just repeat the technique. So we're going to be knotting twice. Do the same again onto the next strand. So what was originally strand 2 is now the one I'm working with to get through to the other side where it rejoins the original strand 1. And every now and then it'd probably be useful if you sort of neaten up your ribbons, get them into the right positions again so you don't get them muddled too easily. Okay, so this is a much more time consuming technique, braiding technique, and obviously because it needs your focus, it is easier to make a mistake. It's a bit like knitting in that sense, in that you could create extra holes or where you've missed a knot, or you've done too many knots and it ends up uneven. But it's good to have a go at this. So whilst it is a really complicated method, if you've not had a go at this, this is what the end result can look like. So we've got 3 different colours running through this braid, and you can see the pattern repeat itself. So it starts off with white, then goes like a silvery colour, then a light blue, and it just repeats that pattern all the way through. So it's a nice way again of adding more texture to a piece of jewellery, and more colour and pattern. This one was using 3 strands rather than the 6 I've just shown you. It's just that the 3rd strand has been trimmed off here. But yes, that's the sort of thickness you'd get if you used 3 strands of ribbon, depending on the thickness of ribbon you're using. So it'd be great to see you give it a go. Again, don't panic if you don't get the result that you like. It may be that you can use one of the other techniques for your next piece of jewellery, but I can't wait to see what you do.